Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Very good day to you. Welcome to another edition of Life Matters, because every life does matter. So don't forget to interact with us. Remember, our show is on our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV Life Matters, and you connect with us via our social media pages and also a WhatsApp line. We want to hear from you, what you think of the show, what you want to see or hear on the show, and what is of interest to you and why life really matters to you. Just tell us why. I'm Khawa Solomon. I'll be with you, and do stay with us for the next hour as we discuss abuse, and child grooming. It is a topic that we have handled on the show before, but now we speak to Yasmina Samai from the Western Cape in Cape Town, social worker who deals with this and is very passionate about the subject of happy families, raising happy children in a happy home. Let's welcome her back. Assalamu alaikum to Yasmina.
Assalamu alaikum.
Shukran so much for your time once again and affording us on this discussion specifically. So protecting our children is a big thing that we want to do always, and always looking out for our children. Why would you say the discussion of abuse is important?
So this discussion is definitely very important, and usually I would pick up on these things. So working in the community, doing workshops, things like that, and I would see that this seems to actually be a topic, especially in our Muslim community, where we find that we tend to not want to speak about these sensitive issues. So we would avoid these issues, we would sweep it under the rug. And I mean, I'm sure many of us know of cases within our Muslim community, within schools and things like that, where these cases occur, but as quick as possible to be swept under the rug or sorted out, etc. So I think it's important that we bring this awareness out of abuse, and we have more individuals that are equipped with the knowledge on how to protect our kids. Because and my parents and my grandparents always speak about the time where the your neighbors would say, your children are my children, the people, everyone in the streets would look after your kids. There would be involvement and that effort in taking care of the kids as a collective. But we seem to have lost that today, these days. And what I'm trying to do is to get that back, get that ownership of all children around us. They are deserving of respect, of safety, of being protected by adults, because we know kids aren't able to do this by themselves and they require that assistance from adults that know right from wrong. So this is why this topic is definitely on the top of my list on things that we want to get out there. How do you pick up on abuse? What do you do in those cases? But also what we tend to forget is it's actually our legal obligation to report cases of, so if we suspect abuse, and we're going to go into more detail about abuse and signs and symptoms, but it's actually our legal obligation to report this because we have to protect our kids as a collective. But many people don't know this and they would turn a blind eye or they would say, it's none of my business. Let's not get involved in. So these are things that we need to change, and having this program, inshallah, is the step in that direction.
Inshallah. I want to look at, what abuse is actually, because to many it is defined differently and to many it's understood differently. So just expound on the word abuse. What does that word mean and how do we identify? Just explain the word. What is abuse?
So abuse is it's any harm or ill treatment inflicted on a child. But just to extend that definition on those that are also mentally disabled, because remember, we can have an individual that is 30 odd years old but has the mental capability of a child. So not only child, but those with mental disabilities as well. So that is what abuse is. So it's the ill treatment or harm inflicted on a child or those that are mentally disabled. So that would be a basic idea of exactly what abuse is. But obviously, we'll go into more detail about that. Some examples would be things like sexually abusing a child, it's a bit of a sensitive topic, and we'll get into that a bit later on as well. Bullying also, and what people don't realize is bullying from child to child is also abuse. So they would think that abuse is only from an adult to a child, but it can be from child to a child as well. And there are many other examples of this. Also, having your child do work, labor, and to the extent that they don't go to schools and don't get their basic rights, this is also abuse, child neglect, etc. We can go into more detail.
So then take us through the different types of abuse that we need to identify, because often we just think it's something that we see. And also this new age abuse online as well. So take us through the different types of abuse.
Yes, yes. So we get what we all know as physical abuse. We get emotional abuse. We get sexual abuse. Then we get child labor, and then we also get deliberate neglect of a child. So these are the main overriding factors. Obviously, all of this can be broken down much further. And like I mentioned now, social media also plays a massive role in this, in bullying as well. This is what we find today. But just to go into physical abuse, so physical abuse is any act or threatened act of physical violence towards a child. So it's important here that we recognize that physical abuse is not only the physical aspect of it, harming the child directly, but it's also the threatened act of it. So if you, for example, stand in front of a child and you act as if, okay, you're going to punch the child, but you punch as far as you can, and then just before you reach the nose, then you stop. So that is threatened abuse because you maybe were aware of the fact that weren't going to punch the child, but the child wasn't aware of it. So that's threatened abuse, which also falls under physical. And then you get deliberate neglect. So this is a failure to see to the child's basic needs. So, and remember, this is the parents is one of the guardian's responsibility to do so. So this should be intellectual needs, emotional needs, as well as social needs as well. It should be taken care of on behalf of the child. Because obviously we're aware that the child cannot see to these needs by themselves, and they require that parental supervision and assistance to have access to these basic needs. Then we have sexual abuse as well. So sexual abuse is, like I mentioned before, it's a bit more of a sensitive topic, but you get sexual molestation or assaulting a child or allowing this to happen to a child. Very important. So it doesn't mean you have to do the act yourself, but being witness to this happening to another child also falls under this category. So you're allowing it to happen. And then encouraging or inducing a child to be used for sexual gratification of another, doesn't even have to be yourself. So using a child in sexual activities or exposing them to sexual acts. And so this example is pornography. And just take it a step further, we are oftentimes not aware of what our children are exposed to on social media, on TV programs, etc. To have a child being exposed to these things that definitely are not age appropriate, and let alone go to the fact that Islamically should not be permissible, but having a child exposed to these sexual acts, this is also falls under sexual abuse. Yes, yeah.
Okay. No, no. Is there more that you want to elaborate on the type of abuse?
No, I think
Okay.
that's okay.
So
No.
so let's look at how this compares to the values of us practicing Muslims when it comes to the different types of abuses, how we treat our children, what the Prophet ﷺ says to us when it comes to, taking care of a child.
Sorry, I missed the last part of the question.
So take us
Repeat that.
through exactly what you've mentioned, the type of abuse. How do you care for a child in the sense of protecting them, keeping them safe? How does that compare to the values that we need to have as practicing Muslims when it comes to raising our children, protecting them, treating them the way we should? Because back in the day, we would say, "Oh, we got a hiding." We got slapped around, nothing happened to us, and why can't I do it today? So let's look at how the Prophet ﷺ practiced teaching children, and what was abuse in the arena of us practicing Muslims.
Yes, so this is actually very interesting. I attended a workshop not too long ago. I was asked to speak on certain topics, and what I would do is when I introduce myself, I would always stay away from saying that I'm a social worker because that hinders quite a bit of conversation in a group. So I listen to individuals speaking about the kids, how they discipline the kids, how the kids are behaving, and things like that, and the responsibilities that the kids have. And I was listening attentively. I was taking part in the conversation, and later on they introduced me as my social worker. And the gasp that the entire table had. They were all shocked. And immediately when I came back and they were trying to say all this, oh no, this is what I was taught. This is how my parents disciplined me, and this is generational. And you can't come with your new things and telling us how to discipline our kids and things like that. That is why kids are so naughty these days. So they just completely went at it, and it's true. A lot of the practice that we have today, and as when I speak to parents, we find that they tend to lean towards negative reinforcement. And probably this is learned behavior. This is behaviors that we've seen our parents did with us, their parents did with them. And then you think to yourself, okay, look, I turned out pretty well as an adult.
Yeah.
So those methods probably worked, and it made me then practice that methods with my kids. But what I try to get across is that actually we don't get our parenting skills from our parents or your grandparents or an adult or so that you admire or your neighbor or so. No, just as you mentioned, where do we get it from? We get it from our Prophet Sallallahu, because they are the best of the examples. No matter how much good our parents have done for us, they are human and they make mistakes.
Yeah.
So we don't directly take what they've taught us, what they've done for us. They did their best under their circumstances, in their context, they did their best. But that might not be what's best for us. So I'm coming back to our process. So what we do, and you can see by his acts, he was very gentle when he dealt with kids. But a very big takeaway from the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is the fact that he led by example. So we can't be as adults telling our kids, don't watch those vulgar things on TV, don't watch that violence, don't watch those sexual acts and things like that on television. But then they see, but my parents watch those things. So in other words, if my mom is 26 years old, and so in other words, when I reach the age of 26, I can watch those vulgar things or those sexual things on TV.
Yeah.
No, at any age, whether it is your child or your grown adult, those things are still haram.
Yeah.
So it's you leading by example. If you have a quarrel or so with your husband, how do you deal with that situation? Because remember, this is you and your husband, and you are dealing with some issues. Maybe there's anger, things like that. You heated emotions, but your kids will say, okay, under those circumstances, when I'm feeling heated, when I'm feeling angry, then I also have the right to shout. Maybe I also have the right to lift up my hands.
Yeah.
You see, so it's definitely what we have to take from our sunnah is the fact that observational learning is it's a game changer. We need to see it as our daily acts within the home. That is actually how we parent. It's not only when you have to discipline your child. It's not only when you're directly speaking to your child. No, it's everything you do day to day. Your child will see you make wudu to make salah. So they know that is something that I should do. Your child will see that the certain things that you brush your teeth, things like that. Observational learning. That's key. That's the best way to parent. It's when you change your own negative behaviors because you want those positive behaviors for your child. So that definitely things take away from
So
our
we need
process.
to cut out the thinking of generational behavior and what we thought we knew, to what we know we are currently living in. We are speaking to social worker Yasmina Samai, who's guiding us on protecting our children, raising our children in a happy family within the happy home. I'm Khawa Solomon. Stay with us. We'll take a short break and we'll continue this conversation on abuse and child grooming back in a moment. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. As we highlight child protection, abuse no more. Did you know that every 15 minutes a child is killed in Gaza? Not died, murdered. So I think by the time we're done with the show, we'll look at 5 stats, 4 to 5 children that had been killed during this time of the war-torn conflict. So some interesting facts that we need to just, be aware of, as well as educate ourselves, as currently we're still talking Palestine. And today we focus on abuse, child abuse, which is currently happening, and is the world silent or not? So what are you doing about it? We continue this conversation of child abuse, protecting our children, with Yasmina Samai, a social worker online all the way from Western Cape, and also has a background in Islamic studies. So we like to touch on that as well. Yasmina, just before the break, you defined child abuse, what we see it now, what we think it should be, and also to understand how to raise our children in the time that we are living in. So, what are some of the signs and symptoms we can watch out for to recognize and tell us that our child is being abused, or any child, in fact, that's being abused?
Yes, that's important. Not only our own kids, but all kids, because we have that responsibility as adults. So some things to look out for, if, for example, physical abuse. So you look out for most obvious would be injuries on the child, or something you also might pick up is that maybe your child flinches with certain things. And what I picked up actually when I worked with individuals from underprivileged communities, I've actually picked up that what a lot of the children are struggling with is that when they hear loud noises, loud bangs, they would duck for cover, or they would go under the table, or they would cover their ears and things like that, because they are tuned into it's most likely gunshot, and they know how to protect themselves from it. So this is just this one sign, but look out for your kids. Maybe if they flinch if somebody comes too close to them, or maybe you were reaching over to grab something, but by mistake you went close to the child and they flinch. So these kind of things, and then injuries. Always be aware of injuries, and I think we touched on this before, that if you're a parent of a child, you need to be able to have a couple of minutes in the day where you tune into that child completely. Whether it is when you're washing a child, or just and I'm not saying not even in the car when you're driving. There needs to be a time when you are looking at the child and paying attention to the child. So you should be able to see what is this new scratch on your hand, what is this mark on your face, why are you limping, or things like that. It is your responsibility to pick up things like this, because it might not be information that the child is willing to share out of their own. It might take you to have to probe to get this information out. Also, if there's like attention-seeking behavior, or isolation also, so it can be on both ends, depending on your child and how they are, their characteristics. So you need to take note of this as well. So it's out of the norm, basically, of your child's behavior. Then deliberate neglect. So there's a difference, because you can't say that individual that is perhaps poor is being neglected, because there's a difference. A child that is poor doesn't necessarily have to be unkept or neglected. So, for example, you would look at the clothing, you would look at personal hygiene and clothing also. So is it according, is the weather correct? So in other words, it's very hot outside, but they're wearing layers and layers of jackets and gloves. Or maybe because under their circumstances, they're not able to leave their clothes at home, or they're not feeling so to is it weather appropriate? And then if it's very, very cold outside, are they wearing short sleeves, things like that? So these are the things that we need to take note of. And then emotional abuse. Um, so you look at how they respond to when you're shouting. Okay, like I mentioned before, I think this shouldn't be the case. But do they have an irrational or out of the ordinary response, maybe when you raise your voice, things like that? Because as parents, maybe we have a certain home environment, but this might not be the same environment that they have at school. So you need to be able to see, okay, but because of the environment they have it in the home, it was not normal for you to react in this way under these circumstances. So what circumstances have you been surrounded by that you now react in this way? You probe. So these are things that you probe further with your kids. And like I said, it is your responsibility to do that, because a child won't willingly come with information to you. Maybe you have a good relationship with your child. That they are able to come to you and ask you questions, but perhaps not. And perhaps they don't feel comfortable. Maybe you think they feel comfortable, but that's not the case. They might not be as comfortable speaking to you about certain things. And it takes you to actually build that relationship with your child in order for them to feel comfortable enough to speak to you. But what to look at for sexual abuse is a big giveaway. Also, be, do they know things that you have not exposed them to? So maybe they starting to ask you questions like things depending on the child's age, maybe things like kissing, touching, or maybe they'll actually start to do these things to themselves or others. And and I've actually just recently dealt with this as well, where there was concerned about this. And remember, as a parent, if you we tend to think our kids are perfect and they don't do anything wrong. But the reality is you can't control every aspect of what your child's exposed to during the day.
Yeah.
Because they are in the school environment, they're at extramural, they're at madrasa. So you can't, like I mentioned this before, put a camera on them and then watch their every move throughout the day. Unfortunately, that comes now with trust between the two of you.
Mm.
To be able to trust that your child will be able to act responsibly within the situation the way you've trained him to. So, if, for example, an adult comes to you and says to you, my child shared with me that perhaps your child exposed them to A, B, and C. Maybe your child touched them in a certain way. Maybe
Okay.
your child tried to kiss them or
Mm.
things like this. You should be open to this information because remember, you might think of it in a certain way, but your child acts different in other environments. So if you
Mm.
realize, but somebody's warning you that your child did something inappropriate or not age appropriate, and now you're picking up this behavior, somebody else might have told you, or you might have seen it yourself, or aunt or uncle or grandparent told you. So these are the signs of things that you need to pick up. So, like I mentioned, sexual vocab. Do they know things, words that they shouldn't have been exposed to in the first place? Behavior not age appropriate. Are they now promiscuous in their behavior?
Mm.
And you should know your child. You should know how they handle situations. Maybe if there's a room full of, if you have a girl, there's a room full of boys. If there's a boy, a room full of girls, or whatever. And you know, okay, the behavior is changing. Obviously, there's going to come a time in the child's growth when they're going to become more aware of the opposite gender. But you need to see, is that age appropriate or not? And I now I'm putting a lot of focus on age appropriate
Yeah.
behavior because you need to pick up that these things will happen. They will become more aware of the opposite gender. But are they acting appropriately? Are they promiscuous? Or are they, on the other end, they're exceptionally scared of a male figure?
Mm.
They're very scared of a tall man or whatever it is. You need to look out for these changes and then ask. Ask your kid. I realize when this uncle walks in the room, you get a little bit nervous. When this aunt walks in the room, you hide away, you hold on to mommy, you hold on to daddy. So
Yeah.
you probe
Yeah.
and you find out these things.
I think we can do an entire show just to look out for signs and symptoms when our child is in distress and kind of find out why they're feeling bad if they are acting, differently or badly. We're chatting about child abuse and the different types of abuse, watching out for signs and to look out for if your child might need some attention or even some help intervention as well. So stay with us. Child grooming is coming up next, and how we can interact with our children when it does come to being confident and allowing them to be confident to tell us how they're feeling. We're chatting to Yasmina Samai, a social worker, but more just after this. Stay with us. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. Very good day to you. Remember, you can interact with us via social media pages, Hilaal TV, as well as our YouTube channel, Hilaal TV Life Matters. And we'll upload any of the shows that you have missed on the show. Please do interact with us via email as well and WhatsApp. And tell us what you want to watch, how important these topics are discussed, that we are ready to discuss on air with our specialist who you'd like to see on air. We love how you make the show, so please do interact with us. I'm Kawa Solomon, and we're chatting to social worker who has a Islamic studies background as well, based out in the Western Cape, Cape Town, Yasmina Samai. Welcome back, Yasmina. And I think earlier on we were chatting just about the signs and symptoms to watch out for. And I think we can. I have got a few questions with regards to that because we can make an entire show on that. But we did also want to touch on grooming, child grooming. But just to come a little bit back to what you've mentioned about children and identifying certain things, can a form of child abuse be when you tell a child or a boy and be age or gender specific to say, oh no, you too big now, you're acting like a baby, or something like, boys don't cry, man up. Would that also be forms of abuse? And how can we protect ourselves from saying certain things, inappropriate things to our children that's not necessarily, called for?
Yes, this is true, and this is also is one of the issues that generational. When we find that um, this, especially on males, and actually females also with a different set of issues,
Mm,
where we have this, like you mentioned, we will tell them that this is not to show you emotions is not appropriate for a male, or for a female, you're showing too little emotion. You should be more like this, and
mm,
so this is, I wouldn't say directly this is a form of abuse, but it could lead to that if we
mm,
create an environment where the child is not able to express themselves correctly. So if they going through something that is difficult, and remember, something for an adult that's difficult to go through is very different for a child. Something you're struggling with is maybe work or financial aspects and things like that. But for a child, they don't have those issues. So things that you might see that are as minor are major to them, and it's very important to them. So things like losing a friend at school, things like somebody saying a bad word, or saying or taking their lunch, or things like that. Those are very big issues for a child to deal with at their age in their environment.
mm,
So we need to be conscious of this, and then be able to allow that child to show the appropriate emotions for that. Because if we don't do that as parents, we're going to see that this can have actually consequences when they are older. Because remember, you are raising, yes, you are raising your son, but you are raising someone's future spouse. You
yeah.
are raising someone's future father. You are
Mm,
raising an individual that might become a politician, a doctor, a teacher, whatever it is, in their various fields. So these things play a role. So if you are going to hinder this child from showing emotions, appropriate emotions for the context, then you're going to create this environment, or this thought process from the child where I'm not allowed to show emotions. I'm not allowed to react in a certain manner, or maybe nobody cares about what I'm going through. Nobody's there to assist me. I'm alone in these things. And I mean, we're just speaking about a male now. Females too. There are different things that females struggle with. So things like uh, we actually see a lot of females these days. There's a lot of, especially perhaps in our, a lot of emphasis being placed on the female to be able to cook, to be able to clean, and then have a certain amount of chores, but then
mm,
also to a certain extent perform academically well. But in those same pressures are not placed on the male individuals in the family. So because they might be more focused on achieving things outside of the house, or whatever it is. But then you have this pressure on the female to do significantly more within the home, because it's seen as, no, this is her duties. And I'm not even going to the rights or responsibilities of spouses, of the male and the female. But if you learn a bit more within the Islamic sciences, that this is not the responsibility of the female. But that's too much detail. But yes, it can have dire consequences on the child. So you think in your house it's okay to say certain things, but constantly
yeah.
reinforcing not being able to show emotion, reinforcing that it's your duty to be able to hold the entire household up,
Mm.
whether it is chores or food or whatever it is, but you're only a 12-year-old girl. So these things, these pressures, yes, it will have an impact on the child. If not at that age, and whatever positions they would hold later in their lives.
Thank you. That's very important
Yes.
and some pertinent information. We do apologize for the connection there. There has been some connection issues with Yasmina on her side, but hope what was said was able to reach you in a way that you could understand and hopefully implement it. So let's look at child grooming, sexual child grooming, and this is a new. This is actually a new genre that we need to familiarize ourselves with, and that it is happening, especially if your child is online, which I know 98% of children are online and they have cell phones and they can have literally be connected to the world in the palm of their hands. So let's define a child grooming and how it differs, if it does, from child abuse.
So this is quite a lengthy one, but just so I don't miss out on any words. So it's our age to persuade, facilitate, or diminish, or or reduce any resistance or unwillingness of a child in order to ultimately engage the child in a sexual act. So this is very important. It's encouraging, persuading, facilitating, diminishing or reducing resistance. So this is what child grooming is. So you're taking your time to follow all these steps to make sure all these boxes are ticked in order for you to eventually perform a sexual act on this child. So this is what child grooming. So this is a definition of child grooming, and it leads to sexual abuse.
Okay.
And something I need to add here, and what people, especially our Muslim community, might not like for me to mention, but unfortunately, yeah, Muslims, but we are a Muslim minority, and we find ourselves in a South African context. So you need to take this into consideration that a child, and I say child because I feel it is a child, but the age of consent is 12 years old. And remember, the consensual acts, sexual acts can take place from 12 years already, so you can give consent, but it can happen between individuals that have an age gap of no more than 2 years.
Okay.
So 12-year-old and 18-year-old, and I mean, for obvious reasons, they are very much different in their programming, in their involvement and knowledge of these things. So those two things that you must take into consideration. The age of 12, you can give consent, and you can give consent till the 12-year-old and 14-year-old, but you cannot exceed more than 2 years. So this is the age of consent. So this is South African law. But obviously, we don't want that the South African law. We have strict laws when it comes to our Sharia, our Islamic law.
Yeah.
So it is important for us to learn this and to take this into consideration first. And then with that lens, realize, okay, but our child is protected from these South African laws. Because in your house, in your household, you might say, oh, I'm not going to tell my child that they can consent to sexual acts at the age of 12. Unfortunately for you, this is being taught at schools, like orientation. This is being drilled into the child, and these things are being taught, and they're also being exposed to these things. So no matter how you are being exposed to this, so you need to have the knowledge of this and educate your child from Islamic perspective, so that they are equipped to be able to handle themselves in a Muslim minority context.
I want to elaborate how we can identify child grooming or when a child has been affected by a sexual grooming and not even know that it's happening, because it doesn't just happen online. It can be something happening within your family or even, in an outside environment that they are exposed to. So stay with us as we discuss abuse no more, protecting our children, more on child abuse with social worker Yasmina Samai just after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Assalamu alaikum. A very good day to your last few minutes as we wrap up child abuse, knowing it, seeing the signs and symptoms, realizing how we're approaching our child. And there's a very common saying that we should raise our children in the era that we are living in, not that what we grew up in. So yes, things are very different now, and raising your children is much more challenging. And getting the whip of the hand or a smack doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work, but our children are more emotional, they're more attached to us. So let us connect with them in a different way, and let us use the way of the Prophet ﷺ to raise our children as a pure example, and let us be the example first. Online, we have a social worker from the Western Cape in Cape Town, and also has a Islamic studies background to advise us on this topic, is Yasmina Samai. Welcome back. And Yasmina, we need to wrap up in this conversation. And this is a topic never to ever stop talking about. Protecting our children is always something that we need to do. So let's just speak on child grooming. And we've established that it is a form of child abuse. How can parents, caregivers, even teachers, even a community member recognize the fact that, this is taking place in a child, and some of the telltale signs that we can watch out for?
Okay. So to just quickly to briefly go over this, the first thing to note is that child grooming and abuse usually happens by individuals that are very close to the child.
Okay.
So it's always when you least expect. So these would be the and something that is important to mention is that and when a child lacks in certain parts, so when a child lacks in certain parts like emotionally, financially, whatever it is, and these are what child groomers look out for. So they say, okay, this is a child that lacks that emotional safety net, so from their parents, from their guardians, and they seek then to fill this gap. Or they see the family themselves have a financial difficulty, so they will make sure this family or this child becomes financially dependent on them. Then this puts them in a perfect space to be able to groom the child, to be able to have access to their child frequently. And we as parents sometimes we don't realize we're doing this. Sometimes we go to functions, sometimes we go out to so then we only see our child. So sometimes we would go out with our child, then we would only see them after an hour, after
Mm.
2 hours. And then you think, oh, but my child is fine, we're with family. But these are the things that child groomers look out for. They look
Yeah.
out for a child that's not where parents are not vigilant.
Mm.
So these things you must make sure you cover all aspects when it comes to your child. Do not make them a target for these individuals. So what to look out for? You need to look out for behaviors such as maybe your child is becoming too familiar, too dependent on another individual. So,
Okay.
and it doesn't have to be an adult. It can actually be an older child as well that might have knowledge of these things and might need these sexual gratifications from the child. So, or might have been abused by themselves also.
Mm-hmm.
So, what they would do is they would frequently be alone with your child. Maybe your child will often talk about this individual. They bought me this, or they're messaging me, or just their dependence on another individual. They also start to then have these secrets between the two of them. And this should never be allowed. Your child
Okay.
should have this relationship with you, perhaps a best friend or so, but there's certain secrets that should not be kept between adults or older children and your child. So this is a few things, and they will often test. So they will do play fighting, they will do touching, they might even try and kiss your child. But these things, remember, they test you. So maybe we're sitting in a gathering, there's an uncle, an aunt, or whatever it is, that now your child is sitting on their lap, but then they start to tickle the child. But by accident, their hand slips to certain parts of the body.
Mm.
So you, as a parent, remember that child doesn't see you from that angle. You don't see that the adult touch their private parts. But
Yeah.
a child doesn't think, oh, my mother saw, my mother didn't see them touch my private parts. So
Mm.
they going to look at you because they feel uncomfortable. They will look at you and they will say, okay, my mommy didn't react negatively, so maybe this is okay, and they
Okay.
allow it. So
Okay.
this is testing. So
Mm.
this is amongst many other things, but these are the core things to look out for.
So, as parents and guardians, how can we effectively protect our children and guard them against possible child grooming and these sexual acts to protect themselves in a way that and not make them too alert that now we don't want to be around anybody as well, but also just to guard them and to watch out for and in an age appropriate way as well.
Yes. So this would depend on the age of the child, like you mentioned. So
Mm.
maybe it is that you read books to tell the story, to paint a little bit of a scenario for the child, and you can ask them questions on the books. So
Okay.
maybe there are very good books out there. I'm sure I think it's take a lot sometimes I browse, and you'll
Mm.
see good books where they would allude to certain things in the book, but they allow for the parent to be able to open discussions with their child just using the book. That's powerful. So it would be maybe an adult touching a child, or it would be various scenarios, and you ask the child, is this okay? Even printing out simple pictures of a girl and a boy, and then you showing them what parts are not okay. What is my safe spaces? Nobody should touch these parts of me. What are okay? Hands are okay, nose, so on. So you do these kinds of inappropriate behaviors. Obviously, the child's a bit older. You need to foster that relationship that even if the child is aware of the fact that sexual grooming, okay, not that they will know sexual grooming is taking place, but they would know something feels funny with this adult, and sometimes they do things that makes me feel guilty. So they might, because they feel this guilt, might not want to share that with the parent. And this is where, and I always harp on this, your relationship with the child comes in. Have that relationship with the child where they come to you and they ask, so and so kissed me on my lips. Is that okay? Was it not okay? So and so touched me certain parts of my body, mommy. And daddy, is this okay? Is it not okay? So this kind of relationship you must be able to foster. And if you find yourself in scenarios where these things happen, use it as a learning curve. Use it as, okay, so what would you have done, my child, in this situation? Do you think the situation was right or wrong? Things like that. Do you think the child should have told mommy or daddy? Things like that. So you use those opportunities. Use props, use toys, be creative, make it at the least uncomfortable you can for your child.
And what sort of, if there was an unfortunate case where child grooming or abuse has taken place, what resources and support are there rather for victims that has found them in this situation, and how can you assist in a way to support and just to lend an ear?
So, so when it comes to, okay, so there's a difference. So if we just maybe talk about issues of maybe rape, so here we find a lot of times that people don't react in the correct way when it comes to issues of rape. So what they would do is they would advise the individual go to a doctor, or they would say, "Oh no, you've gone through this traumatic experience. Go and take a shower." But remember, these things that you're telling your child to do takes away the ability to at a later stage, or at that stage if you're prepared to lay a case. So what you do, you're washing away evidence. You're taking that power of the child to be able to stand up to this perpetrator. So we need to educate ourselves what to do under each different scenario, because that would be cases of rape. And you think go to a GP, but remember the GP might do an examination, but they might not have the knowledge of how to extract the evidence. They might not even have the time to be able to come to a court case. Do you understand? So where do you go then? This would then, so cases of rape, you go to a Tutuzela center close to you. And it's a simple, you can do a Google, whatever area you're in, and see the closest Tutuzela centers to you, because these individuals, they know what to do in cases of rape. But in cases of abuse, in other forms of abuse, there's a Form 22. Just to get to get used to this form, I would say go to I think it's Bedisa's website. They have a Form 22. Look at the things that the Form 22 is actually asking you for. So even if you're not in a scenario when you need it, but look at the form so that if ever you are in a scenario, you know what things to listen out for. And remember, if a child comes to you and you're the first point of call, when a child comes to you and they say, um, they're being abused, or they were raped, or things like that, it is not your job to probe. Do not probe. What you do is you sit and you listen. I've been in a case where an individual had to give off a story that they were sexually assaulted, and the individual, the community worker that took the story, they broke down and cried. And only at that point did that child realize that, oh my word, something bad happened to me.
Sure.
So always take the child first into consideration before you want to show your own emotions.
That's very important information. And thank you so much for guiding us, Yasmina Samai, social worker. And we hope to do a series with her, raising happy, healthy children in a happy home. But Jazakallah for your time. We will continue talking about children and raising them in a protected manner. I want to touch on, hopefully, inshallah, shouting at your children and what psychological effects it has on them. You know, is it good? You know, should it happen? And how do you approach children as well when it comes to disciplining? But it was an absolute pleasure chatting to you about child grooming and child abuse. Jazakallah and shukran so much for your time.
Shukran.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So Yasmina is also available. We will leave her details as soon as you contact us via email or on WhatsApp. And we appreciate her time. We'll chat to her again in the next topic of raising healthy, and happy children in a happy home. Thank you so much for joining us and staying with us on Life Matters as we discuss this pertinent topic. Keep it going, and do remember you need to connect with your child. You are the first role model, and inshallah, with that in mind, du'as and prayers will keep us together in the right path in raising our happy, healthy children in a happy home. From myself, Hawa Solomon, wassalamu alaikum, and goodbye for now.